We are.
Okay. Oh, hi, Avria. Okay, I think we're here. So we'll call the meeting of the CPDC to order. And with that, I would entertain a motion to go immediately into executive session. You've got the motion from last week, right? From last month, right?
I think so. Executive motion session, discuss strategy with respect to, is that the one?
Yeah.
Strategy with GC Federa Contracting Inc. versus CPDC, the property known as 459 Main Street, and the litigation therein.
So are you moving that we go into
I am
executive
moving
session
that we
for
go
that?
into
Okay.
executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, into executive session we go. Should somebody tell the RCTV
Birch Meadow.
There's nobody out in the hall.
Okay.
They gave up on us. Is there anybody else in the Zoom room or is
There is a few people in the Zoom room. So we do have Mark from Activitas for the Birch Meadow plan. Mark, I have your plan set. I can share them on screen when you're ready. But if the board is ready, you can continue that discussion.
Yes, well, let's move on to the continued public hearing for
40-year plan review, is that the one?
yeah, this says Birch Meadows School, and is it really Birch Meadows School?
No, it's
No.
the Birch Meadow complex.
Yeah. All right, let's go.
And is there an E on Lord?
Oh, Lord?
No, there's
There is
not. There's no, as in Tracy. Yeah, I'm just thinking like for the minutes, let's get that right.
Yeah.
because It can be confusing if when we're looking back.
Yep.
Okay, so are we going to get a presentation on the updates?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Mark Novak. I am a design principal with Activitas. Stephen Crisipulli, who has presented to you in the previous hearing, is lucky to be out of country with his new wife on his honeymoon. So you guys are stuck with me tonight. Just wanted to update you on a couple of items and a couple of changes that we've made based on the previous meeting with you all. The first one, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind going over to the parking lot for Birch Meadow Drive. And based on some of the safety concerns with turning movements at the entrance exit out to Birch Meadow Drive, the new entrance exit, in discussion with Ryan Percival, the town engineer, and public safety, we've added in some striped out no parking areas immediately adjacent to the entrance exit in order to improve sight lines out to Birch Meadow Drive to help with those turning movements. Additionally, in the parking lot, there was concern with the amount of lighting that we've had proposed in the parking lot and also on the Central Spine walkway running from Birch Meadow Drive all the way through the middle of the site down to the high school parking lots. In both locations, we've reduced the amount of lighting with our electrical engineer. At the parking lot, we've reduced lights from 14 to a quantity now of 9. And at the Central Spine walkway, we've reduced from 21 lights down to 16 lights and still maintaining a safe level of horizontal foot candles in all areas. I believe those were the two major requested changes to the documents. If there's any other questions, we've reviewed the draft order. We take no exception to that. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them and do my best to respond.
I saw that you were not putting forth the benches that were requested, and you said that was due to a cost?
That is due to a budgetary challenge. Right now, we, I believe $1.5 million has been approved for the project through ARPA funding. And in discussions with the town manager, Jennifer Arente, we'll call it the project applicant from Recreation, Joe Huggins from Facilities, Ryan Percival from Engineering. We had to make some difficult decisions on where to potentially trim back on scope. We do have pads for the benches, but at this moment we've removed all site furnishings with the exception of the picnic tables within the building pavilion. and some bollards to restrict vehicular access down the road except for emergency vehicles, down the central spine, excuse me, except for emergency vehicles. We will, in the bid documents, include site furnishings as a potential add alternate. So should the project come in under budget, we can add those as a change order.
Excellent, thank you.
Do you have an estimate on what each bench would cost?
I'd have to go, I off the top of my head, I don't know, but typically if we're looking at a park and rec style bench that is a steel bench, typically we use steel benches. They have more longevity than, you know, a wooden bench. But we would be in the range of about $2,500.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I will say on that, I find it interesting that we're investing in lighting, which would only benefit a small number of people a small amount of time, where we don't feel like investing in street furniture that would be used by everyone all the time is a good use of funds. I mean, that's a weird trade-off to me.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I think, you know, in discussing it with recreation, I think site furnishings is something that can be easily be added out of their ongoing budget in the future. Whereas, you know, site lighting is a much larger endeavor. So they wanted to make sure that was part of the package, and then, you know, benches can easily be added, as long as the infrastructure, the concrete pad is there, to accept it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my comment was also, I have a hard time believing that out of $1.5 million project, we can't find $5,000 for the park benches. So I don't know if there's a way to really emphasize that we hope that happens. I mean, it's a small thing out of a very large project.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I understand where you're coming from, and, you know, I think there's a number of things where we had to kind of trim back in terms of budgetary challenges. For example, in the parking lot, you know, instead of using granite curb, we have asphalt berm curb, which is easily damaged with snow plowing operations. So right now, we have asphalt berm in there, but just like the benches, we're carrying a line item in our unit prices. Should the number come in lower, we can handle it via change order and go back to granite.
I got it. And this is not a comment for you. It's really a comment for Ryan, who will watch this or hear this at some point, I assume. You know, we've had, I'll start off by saying, I have a hard time when we make private businesses and citizens live up to a standard, and then the town decides to cut their budget and not live up to the same standards. And we are adamant and have been adamant over the 15 years I've been on this board about vertical granite curb, because the other stuff, as you said, just especially here, is not gonna last.
Yeah.
Right.
And for us to, you know, to, I get it, right? You gotta pull back at some point, but like, we're building something that we know, everyone knows that they're gonna be in there, you know, 10 years from now, replacing all of that. And
in Ryan's defense, he felt very strongly about the granite curb, and I actually had a conversation with the town manager today about the granite curb, and we're exploring options of how to get that back in, because a number of people on his staff have mentioned how critical it is to ongoing maintenance and the ongoing aesthetics, protecting the aesthetics of
yeah,
what's being developed.
I
we've always said it's a
absolutely
penny
agree.
wise, pound foolish thing to do. Right, a couple of things that I'm not there with this plan. I'll just put it out there. One is I heard that there were discussions with the town engineer, and with the recreation department. But right, I'm stuck on that entrance. Right, this space is also a school space, right? I don't know who actually owns this parcel, what entity in the town actually owns the parcel. But the function in that space is as much of a school space as it is recreation department space. I'd say even more school space and recreation space. I asked that the principal from Coolidge be brought into the discussion. Maybe she's not the right one, but someone, whether it's a school committee thing, whoever deals with circulation there. My sense is that, maybe this is the right configuration, but maybe that also means that a whole change to the drop-off pickup scenario at Coolidge is in play here using this parking lot. I think that if one hand in one side of the town is doing something that's going to impact how the other hand, namely the school, is operating, we need to make sure that everyone's at the table and agrees with those changes. I personally don't think this is safe during those. Granted, it's only a couple of hours a day, but it's.
And there's a crossing guard.
Yeah, and it's still not safe, right?
Well,
So-
there's a crossing guard, there's not a crossing guard at the middle school, there's a crossing guard down at the elementary school, where you've got,
the spine coming out.
yeah, the spine coming out, and it's actually not even there, the crossing guard is a little bit further down, it's not. Actually, these drawings could be helped a lot if we could see where the intersection of Arthur B.
Yeah.
Lord Drive is.
So,
Yeah.
we got that letter from the police department, right? They're not on board with that.
Well, I'm looking in this, so this is this, we have a memo that is a response to the police department. Do we have a memo from the police department saying that we have a
I
memo
saw
that
one,
says,
yeah,
Okay.
they want bump outs,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not sure bump outs are the right thing either,
Yeah.
right? It sounds to me like there needs to be more discussion.
Yeah, so-
Not in a curved fashion.
So we do want to bring it to the PTTF for the larger group because there is concern that even restricting no left turn movements out of that drive entry, now you're forcing everybody to that immediate adjacent crosswalk by turning right, going right to that crosswalk. So there are still concerns on
Right,
some
and
of these traffic.
if part of the schools, right, if part of what I heard before was a part of the idea about having this entrance in anyways is about having school buses come in there. Well, a lot of the school buses from visiting teams, which is what I heard, actually come around Birch Meadow Drive and they can't take, I don't know, can they take a left? Can they take a right into that parking lot from Birch Meadow Drive? I doubt it.
or they have to take that second left because it's bigger and wide, second right, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
Like
know.
that, to me, that seems like an odd turn into there. I don't know if that can work. Or is this presuming that everyone's coming to this parking lot from Main Street, which the buses don't.
Right, because they come from the freeway.
They come from the freeway, yes. So, right, this is gonna instigate a different, right, and they're always gonna come that way because they're coming from all over the place, so.
Right.
That's item one. Item two, I am, the perspective I'm giving this statement is in the same perspective that, that Imagination Station, right? The repair or replacement Imagination Station, as soon as it was taken down, the next phase was gonna happen 2 years later, and here we are, somewhere between 18 and 20 years later, right? So when the statement is said, don't worry about the light poles that are a foot off the walkway, which is dangerous, which is a dangerous situation. When the statement is said, don't worry, that's in the next phase, I don't believe, I'll state a fact, I'm not believing that there's gonna be a second phase, right? Because we can't even get the funds together to finish this phase the right way. I don't want something that is put up there that's not safe with the promise of a second phase.
Right.
I really have a hard time with those poles, those light poles that are staying there.
So just to make sure I understand, are you asking for those light poles at the softball field to be addressed as part of this period, or?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanna be super
Yes.
clear with what we're asking
You know,
for.
relocation of a utility, right? And I know it's probably more complex, but maybe it doesn't need to be in the interim, right? Relocation of a utility pole is not a big expensive thing. Now, if you're gonna redo all the lights, all that stuff, yeah, but relocating a utility pole so that it isn't a half a foot off the path is, would do wonders to make that path functional. And I just don't, we wouldn't, if this was a private project, we wouldn't accept that as a, don't worry, it's in phase 2. We wouldn't.
Right. And this is, it was supposed to be part of phase 2, and this is phase 2, right? This is the next phase, and I know, so I'm listening to that, I tend to agree. I know that there's challenges, right? Because a certain project scope was probably approved as part of ARPA. But I guess I'm backing John up with, it's like, anything that's unsafe there, it's like, why are we not addressing it now?
What I would do
In
is,
your opinion, what is the safety concern? Someone on a bike is gonna hit it, or?
right, and Heather can back me up here, right? The design for a walkway, right, you have to have a clear zone, just like on roadways, you have to have a clear zone off the edge of the pavement. In this case, you have no clear zone, and so what happens is you're doing two things. One is anyone that's riding a bike, right? They hit their handlebars or themselves on the pole as they're going by, or what you're doing is effectively narrowing the path itself because someone's going to steer clear a couple feet clear of that pole, and so.
So how is this any different than a street tree in your public walkways on Main Street?
It isn't, but that's not a good design either.
It's done in every municipality in the United States.
Yep. But a lot of them are cut down. I mean, you've got a utility pole
Could we pad it?
It already is padded.
Well, and here's the indication to me, and granted,
To me,
the
it
type of
seems
trails.
more of an aesthetic issue than it is a safety issue.
Well, hold on, the type of trails that I just full disclosure, the type of trails I normally deal with don't require lighting, so that there's the aspect of the big utility poles where there's the trail. To me, I will say, the fact that the poles are covered in padding now because it's a safety hazard for the softball field.
Right, because they're in the middle of the
Is an
softball field.
indication that there's probably a better place for them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of common sense, and while things are getting ripped up.
It just presents a much larger complication to say that a relocation of a utility pole is not a costly measure, I think understates it drastically. Because it's not just a relocation of a utility pole, it's a relocation of all the utilities associated with that pole.
And what do we have on those poles?
I thought it's just a light.
Yeah, I thought that
Our electrical engineer said that it would be a significant increase to the project cost.
So I guess my recommendation would be I know this is drastic, right? But you've got a couple of things that you need to do here, and right, I hear about cost. I question the utility of the lights along the spine. I would put the electrical in and put everything but the actual light poles up, right? Prep it, and then in phase 2, right, you put the light
The
poles.
walkway lighting.
Yeah,
I
and that way you can prep the whole daytime use and including relocating the utility pole, right?
Mhm.
So that you have the whole daytime use of the walkway, right? And then when you get, and I'm gonna say the daytime use of street furniture, right?
Yeah.
We'll put that in there, and then come back and put that lighting in where I think it has marginal utility. That particular
What about
lighting.
the shoulder seasons, though, where we have athletic events that are happening, after dark, when it gets dark here?
So
Right,
I-
but
o'clock in the afternoon, that path is rendered useless. It's
But
unsafe.
the difference here is that when all those athletic, think about it, when all those athletic events are going on, you have the field lighting on.
Right, but it's not lighting the central spot.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah, it is.
It absolutely is.
So I'll vouch from experience that when those fields are all lit up, so I'm thinking about Saturday night lights, I'm thinking about Friday night football games where the kids are all hanging out there. There is enough light to see going all the way
Yeah.
around there, cause kids hang out.
Even when just the
Yeah.
football, even when just the varsity field
So
lighting
I will
is
take
on.
your recommendation, there's enough lights from a live.
Well,
location
cause you've got
perspective.
the lights from turf to even just the stadium lights, there
Those-
is,
those
I mean,
lights
I'm
are
looking at the
LED.
photometrics and everything, but there is enough light to be able to see around, so.
They have 0 foot candle cutoff with outside of 40 feet from the edge of the field.
You can see,
You can see.
you can see,
All right.
you can see pretty well, yeah,
Walk my dog down there all the time. Like you can see. Yeah.
I mean,
When-
it's like you can see better than a full moon night, I mean,
When-
you can definitely
When,
see.
right, absolutely, when there's no athletic events going on and all the field lighting is shut down, it's dark and you can't see, and that's when those are needed. But that's
Mhm.
when there's not a whole lot of people there. And that's why I'm saying the functionality, I mean, there is some utility there, right? Because you would want to be able to use that path while there's no event going on, right? That's a good function there. But the return on investment is limited, right? Because there's, by definition, there's not that many people using it when the field lights aren't on. And so that's how I'm getting to that realization, that recommendation. Because I think safety, right, in both cases, that's really what my focus is. If everyone says, no, it's okay, leave those padded poles there, right off the path, like, sure, you guys take that. But I wouldn't want to recommend that.
I would like to see some clearer evaluation of what the trade-off would be between the lighting if we could get those utility poles moved. I also have a question, if ultimately this group agrees and everybody agrees that having the pathway lighting is a good thing. I mean, it's a fine thing. I have a question about the pathway lighting that I regret that I didn't ask before. The lighting on the pathway, is that high poles or is that kind of the short lighting that just lights the pathway with less light all around?
The shorter pedestrian level poles.
Good. So I think that gets us back to maybe evaluating the trade-off of getting the big poles that are in the way, or in clearly an unsafe place for the complex. It's the complex beyond the improvements that are being made here, if those can be moved. And I don't know, Pam and Tony probably have an opinion too, but I would honestly, I would forego the pathway lighting if that was the trade-off, because I don't know that it's needed all
Andrew,
night, every night.
can you bring up the lighting plan? All right, scroll down a couple of pages, keep going. One more. That one. So what are those hotspots?
That's where the light poles are.
And those are just the short ones?
Those are the short ones, yeah.
When you say short, how tall is short?
I believe they're, I don't know precisely, but I would say that they're 12 to 15 feet off the ground.
Oh, no, that's high to me. Thank you. I was thinking of, when you go to
That's
like
bollards.
colleges and they're the
Yeah.
ballers, they're the low ones. 'Cause- Yeah.
No, these are poles. These are poles, very similar to what, the height that is on the poles over by the front of the stadium.
All right, so now Andrew, if you go back a page or two. Or more. All right, right there.
Mhm.
So from the poles, it looks like 75% of that walkway is already lit up. That there are sections that are a little darker.
Correct, yep.
So we're putting in lighting to cover 25% of the walkway?
No, I mean, it's all averaged out. So we aim for an average maintained foot candle level. So yes, you're gonna have some hot spots and some cooler spots, but the average foot candle level, works out to be in the safe range of 1 to 2 foot candles.
All right, what I'm looking at here is I'm seeing a bunch of blobs.
Yeah,
And I
that's
assume
the, that's the higher intensity light, yes.
right, those are the higher intensity light. So anything outside of the blob, if you didn't have your bollards, didn't have the low level lighting, would be
Mhm.
relatively dark.
No, it still has light. It's not 0 foot candles. It still has some light. It's just not the higher intensity.
Right. So that's my point. And I think that's the point that's being made, that if those lights are on, do we even need that extra lighting for the pathway?
Well, see, the lights associated with the stadium aren't taken into account, or turf 2 are not taken into account in this design.
So I have, okay, so that's good to know. I think the design should take into account the lighting from the other fields, from when those would be most in use. And I guess now that we're digging into this, I'd really like to understand also what the full plan is for that lighting. Is are there hours for that lighting? Is it on all night? 12 to 15 feet. I'm thinking of those poor people who live over on the other side of the tot lot, now seeing the 12 to 15 foot lights, during what hours? I
And
guess
they're-
I agree that
they're
there's some
full cutoff
added,
lights.
what's that?
They're full cutoff lights. They're not spot lights. They're full cutoff lights. They're dark sky compliant. They're LED. So it creates an umbrella of light down on the pathway. It doesn't create any kind of glare going off to abutting properties.
Right, but there's two different things that are being discussed here, right? Right now, this is a park and it's dark.
And it's dark,
Right.
right.
And so full cutoff lights, and I guess that's really another thing. I'm sorry, I'm taking over part
That's
of your thing
okay,
here.
you knew what I think.
But
was
right,
saying.
like we don't need a 1 foot candle in a park along a pathway. I think that's part of the thing that we really need to look at here is you don't need an average of 1 foot candle, right? My impression, right, is we should be looking, I think that's probably where we should be looking at. What is the standard foot candle that we really need if we're talking about, right, the need for here, right, if we already identify that this isn't gonna be high usage, how do I put this? Right, if you layer on top the field lights plus these, right, when it's high usage, and then when it's very low usage, when there's no field usage, there's no field activity, it's a sidewalk. What's the average foot candle that you need there? Then it's probably a half. Right,
Yeah.
because it's it's dark around and it's like security lighting almost.
It's like security lighting, and I guess I would really
It-
question, do we even need full sidewalk lighting through there, through the full night? I mean,
Yeah,
do we have
and-
problems there
right.
now? Do we, I was truly envisioning kind of shorter pathway lighting, so that if somebody was walking through like in the early morning, pre-dawn hours or after dark, taking a walk with their dog, they could see, but I don't think we need sidewalk lighting there. I don't think we need the equivalent, and I hear what you're saying, that it's full cutoff lighting, that it's downcast. I question whether or not we really need that, or if we can go with like whatever is the bare minimum where you can see from spot to spot, see ahead, for people who need that security.
So you're saying the light post should really be at 4 feet?
That's what I was
So
envisioning.
it
I was envisioning
won't-
something that's more park-like,
Right.
yeah,
So it won't disturb the neighbors by
yeah.
shining
I
into
mean,
their.
what we have is parkland. Doing bollards would more be like a college campus.
Yeah,
Yes, and that's what we're saying.
Think of
Okay.
it as a school, I see what you're saying, we have differences in terms of what,
Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
get it.
something that is, I mean, think of this is kind of like a little mini campus right here, and so what are we
Mhm.
providing for what, and I don't know that
So,
we need the
I guess
total,
the other challenge with light bollards is, and I get where you're coming from, because you think we're providing too much light. Light bollards require a lot more fixtures in order to get proper coverage.
okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know too.
And, you know, I completely respect your opinions on when the stadium and turf 2 lights are on, that it casts enough, we'll call it spill. However, when those systems were designed, they were designed that zero spill would be reaching the area of the central spot. And that was verified via light meters. So, you know, it may feel like there's light over there, but if you go out there with a light meter, like Musco Lighting did, you know, where the spine is, it's the light from turf 2 and the stadium is not illuminating that area at all, especially when there's vegetation on the trees in the grove around where the pavilion is going to be. The lights at softball, however, is a completely different scenario, right? Because it's older technology, they're floodlights, they're that probably lights up
Half
the
already,
park.
yeah.
So, you know, I just want to be clear that overlaying, you know, the foot candles from turf 2 and the stadium, which we can do, but it's going to have no effect to the light distribution on the spine.
Okay, well, I guess this is a little bit of a lesson for me personally, because I'm speaking not from a light meter perspective, but from personal perspective of
Yeah,
spending a
I
lot
get
of
it.
time
I get
walking
it
through there.
100%.
You can
I
see.
understand.
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah.
And I don't want to come across as rude or kind of discounting some of your comments. It's just, I'm trying to get on the same
Yeah.
page.
And I can understand what you're saying, it's
Yeah.
like adding kind of incorporating the light spillover from turf 2 in the stadium isn't gonna change the schematic at all, I hear that, yeah.
But I think that probably goes to the point of we probably don't need as much lighting as being planned here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, is there a bylaw in town which states what the minimum foot candle should be for public pedestrian ways?
Everyone's shaking it. I've never heard it, and
All right,
Andrew
'cause
hasn't,
I know
so.
that some communities, like Weston, for example, you know, we've done plenty of work there, and they're very careful with their illumination requirements, because we did an athletic facility at their high school, and we put in some pedestrian lights, and you had to have an average of 1 maintained foot candle and no more, because they were very, very worried that it was going to look like the Vegas Strip when they were done. We hit that, and you know, it's not very bright, 1 foot candle. I believe 1 foot candle is generally, you know, full moon on a clear night.
But if you're saying that the spillover from turf 2 it doesn't register as a foot candle, and we can walk through there fine, and
Yeah,
see,
I get it, yeah.
then right, that sort of proves a point that
Yeah.
that you in that particular area you don't need a whole lot of lighting to be able to be in a sort of a safe, you know.
Yeah. I guess from my standpoint, from a liabilities perspective, and as
Yep.
the town's consultant, you know, if I walk out there with a light meter and it's, you know, something happens. God forbid, like someone stumbles off the pathway, and, you know, they come to the town and say, hey, listen, you know, you didn't have appropriate lighting on here and this pathway was open after dusk. You know, how do we respond to that?
I just Googled real quickly while we're sitting here, little table popped up. District of Columbia, their intermediate sidewalk average foot candle standard is 0.8. New York City, although it's not specified, is 0.46 to 0.93. San Francisco, 0.5. Baltimore, 0.8. Right, so you know, there's a lot here that is, you know, well below zero in urban areas for these sorts of, you know, sidewalk uses. So my sense is that's probably on this particular topic, maybe the direction we ought to be going. That being
So
said,
scale it back to like a half or?
that's my gut. I'm not a lighting guy though. All this being said, knowing how lighting works is that it's not going to change much. It's going to change a fixture and it's going to change, you know, the light cast per fixture. You might be able to get rid of one post,
Right.
but you know, it's not going to
Right.
change. That's not going to change things dramatically. Not that it shouldn't be done, because I do think that what you don't want here is a whole, you know, it lit up dramatically. But I do, going back to Heather's point, right, I think it's really important here to make sure that all of these, both the lighting on the spine and the lighting on the parking lot, right, it's on timers.
Absolutely, it should
yeah,
not
okay,
be there
all
all
right.
night long.
Yeah.
You may have said that,
I did not, but it will be on timers, and they won't be on all night long, and I think, you know, the hours of operation, I believe the discussion was till like 10 PM. But
Yeah.
I would anticipate that the town would be willing to discuss that further.
Well, I think that, right, they're the ones that'll get the calls, so they're gonna have to,
Right.
they're gonna have to figure that out, what that timing is, so. You know, going back on this whole thing, my big concern on the current plan is that the intersection, and I think there needs to be some more discussion on that and bringing in the school,
Is that
School
something that can be
community.
conditioned?
Well, I think there's one thing, I don't know, maybe there's a way to condition it, but what I know is that, so we have the police department, note. And what I'm reading in there is that, that we think that their concerns might be alleviated. I'd like to hear that their concerns are alleviated. I'd like to, this is, I don't know if it's PTTF, the parking and what is that, the traffic task force?
Traffic, transportation.
I'd like someone to look, I mean, I could ask about it again, but I'd like someone to look into, there at least used to be like a group of people, I think it was the schools and the traffic safety officer, that would organize around safety around that Birch Meadow complex, around Birch Meadow, Coolidge, and what's happening there. And I guess I'd like some sort of like just, you know, ask the principals, you know,
Feedback, yeah.
some feedback to either know that A, they're fine with it, B, there is still a task force around that. I don't know if there still is. Is there anybody paying attention on an ongoing basis to the traffic around there? If not, then okay, we'll go with what the police department says, but if there is, I'd like to have the schools take a look at that as well. And it'd be the school principals.
yeah, because, right, this is right in the middle of their pickup, drop off, you know. And the right answer, I mean, I could imagine a scenario where this allows them to change the pickup, drop off situation so that it's better.
Yeah.
But that may require a little bit of tweak, that may require some different striping. You know, I truly can imagine if everyone's on board with using this parking lot during pickup drop off for the school, that they use that. But I think everyone meaning the police and school, and how do you deal with circulation in turning and everything. So I to me that, because if left the way it is, and then you try and have what's essentially an intersection right in front of the crosswalk, that's not going to work.
Do you think, because what I'm looking at this is, they may decide, okay, this could work, but they're gonna end up needing to have another crossing guard at the crosswalk
Yeah.
at that side. And I guess, I just kind of want to put a fine point on this, what are the choices? So are we still, CPDC, are we still unsettled about whether or not it's wise to have that curb cut there? Or is it wiser, are we kind of evaluating whether or not it's safer to not even have that curb cut there and have all the in and out of that one entrance that exists?
My perspective is this seems like this plan is coming from the rec department. And right, this particular stretch of street is used by more than the rec department, and I want to make sure that the school has their say on it, because it's right, there's a lot of different uses here, and I would hate for it to be driven for one particular use and one function with one function in mind, and that sort of seems like there may be some other things that are just part of the discussion that was missing.
Yeah.
And I can't confidently say that I'm for or against the curb cut, because I don't know how it's going to be used.
And so I honestly think, I'm not trying to create work for people or create the expense of doing drawings, but if you were to take this to the school principals, which we're asking you to take it to the school principals, or if I'll ask and see if there's still a group that focuses on this. I think most people would have an easier time evaluating this if you showed what's across the street. So it's like, I'm picturing in my mind's eye, where is that entrance? It's kind of between, the Y and Coolidge. Where's the pathway, getting out, so that you can see where it is in relationship to the existing guarded school crossings.
I think in the previous plan set, we had it on an aerial so that you could see that.
Yeah, an aerial is just fine, yeah.
Right, I think the question was, can we condition it? I'm not, I'll say personally, I'm not ready to, I don't know enough here to confidently vote on this.
So I think the direction, the request is to have we'll just call it the school department, have the school department, maybe the principals, the appropriate people at the schools, look at this, see what adjustments they might make, see how they see this either being beneficial and or impactful to the drop-off pickup scene, shall we call it, at those schools, because it's a lot.
But I think that has to happen in conjunction with the police department.
And the police
Right,
department,
because
yeah,
they
and the
control.
and the traffic
yeah, they-
safety officer,
in the
yeah,
crossing.
right, okay. And then are we also having a request to say, look again at what it might take? And please reply to us on what it might take to move those big poles that are in the softball field.
Yeah.
And trade-offs that there might be. I mean, I don't think we're gonna say no pavilion, move the utility poles instead, but what are the trade-offs that could be done in order to get that done?
Does moving the spine make any sense?
Yeah, we can't without impacting the softball field or going into resource area.
Right, it's a really tight
Yeah.
squeeze there, right?
Yeah,
Well, if that's the case, then can you even move the poles? What happens? Obviously, you can't move them into the softball field.
and you can't move them into the resource area.
You can move them down. There's a little bow, right? So that you can move them down.
That's where the backstop is. I'll look at it,
Yeah.
Thanks.
in an ideal scenario, yeah, they're not gonna be there. And I completely get, your concern about saying, in the future, when the next phase happens, we're gonna straighten out that bow. And then the poles are gonna be addressed when the softball field is addressed, but, when is that gonna happen?
Right, mind you, look at that whole area here and
Yeah, I get it.
right,
I get it.
who hasn't seen one improvement? It's the varsity softball team, right? Like, that field is still horrible, right? And
Yeah.
everyone else has had, $1 million fields, and the softball team is playing with poles in the middle of their field, right?
I will say though that the town has made some tremendous strides over the past 5 years with starting to improve the overall condition of not only the athletic surfaces at the stadium at Turf 2, but the whole Birch Meadow master plan process, and now starting to implement phase 1. There's really some serious momentum going on here, and hopefully it continues. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to leave the softball field with poles still in the middle of it, to me is
gonna be a better
sort of
way.
odd.
All right. I think we have those, I think we got everything noted.
One last note, Andrew, if you can have the Conservation Committee check the lighting on the parking lot.
Okay, they did comment.
They do have a lot of comments. I didn't see anything on the lighting for the parking lot.
Okay. Make sure that.
and we'll be in front of them on Wednesday night.
Perfect.
Okay,
We didn't open this to the public. Are there any raised hands?
do we have anybody on Zoom who wants to comment on this?
I can note that earlier in the evening, Mr. Carlo Bacchi did chat that benches could also be donated, potentially in memoriam. I'm not seeing any raised hands at this time.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I guess,
So we move to continue this, yeah.
So I guess, Mark, can we look to try to address these comments together prior to February 6th? Is that, it's a short turnaround to that next meeting.
It has to be a short turnaround because we need to go out to bid before February. So, there's the potential that we'll be putting these drawings on the street to contractors without actually closing and having your conditions in hand. And then we'll have to issue those as an addenda. Because we need to get this out to bid in order to get pricing in for approval if additional funding needs to be secured at town meeting.
I do need to say that these are not new comments, right? We did request, it wasn't you, obviously, but we did request that you coordinate with the principal, with the school, right? I mean, none of this is
Well,
new,
I believe that the coordination was done and we striped out those areas adjacent to the entrance. And that's what I was told was the solution that was deemed acceptable, excuse me.
But we
And
also
then
heard,
reduce the amount of lights.
we heard from the police department that they're looking for something different. So obviously right, it wasn't full circle, right? It wasn't fully resolved. So it's too bad that you're up against a wall with still dealing with comments from,
We'll get
a
it.
month ago.
We'll get
So,
it. We'll get there. We'll figure it
Yeah.
out.
Is this something that can be handled administratively so that when our feedback, no, you don't?
I'm just shaking my head because I'm not comfortable usually we do that when
Closer.
we've sort of closer and we've framed out how to address the issue. And I don't think we're there.
Okay. Just wondering.
However, if the police department, the school department say, yep, this is beautiful, who are we to argue with them?
Yeah, but that's not the feedback we got.
Right.
So my understanding is public safety is okay with this plan, but I can't say for sure about the school.
Yeah, and I guess,
Yeah,
even the
I
traffic
didn't
officer,
receive news that the police department is not.
the traffic officer basically said that if these changes are addressed, it would greatly improve the traffic and patterns for this project. I guess I'm looking for, it's like,
that's
that's an
right.
improvement,
The
but are
greatly
they-
improved for this project, that doesn't mean it's an improvement or it doesn't mean it's satisfactory. It's, okay, I guess I'll go along with it.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I read that.
I'd like to hear whether or not the traffic safety officer feels this is an adequate and safe setup.
So Mike Scouten does feel that this plan, and he works with the crossings, and he does feel that this plan works with a quick discussion at PTTF to get the signage and regulation process confirmed.
Maybe it was just the wording of his letter made me feel a
So
little
that
bit
letter
unsettled
was
about this.
prior to these plan changes. If you look at the date of the memo, it was early December. It came in just after your first hearing.
Mhm.
And then they revised the plans based on these comments to help address those comments. And whether or not they're perfect, again, I don't know how the schools feel. I imagine,
Let's find out how the schools
Yeah.
feel. Yeah,
okay, I can
let's
get that.
let's just, when it specifically says that it was that exit was closed for safety purposes.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
can we condition it that will meet the school's request?
No, because we don't know what the
Think-
school's requests are
Let me bring this to
yet.
PTTF
Yeah.
in January and get the full story and need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's too unsettled to me to just say, oh, well, to approve it and then condition it to do whatever the schools say. I mean, what if the schools say, we're gonna need another crossing guard? Well, that's a burden on the town. Is the town really ready to do that? I don't know. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just, it is just such a tricky area, such a congested area
Mhm.
in the morning and in the afternoon.
I don't disagree.
Okay, so we've got some action items.
So, I guess, what happens with the utility poles if it comes in and it's a budget buster and to relocate them? Are we back at square one?
No, I mean, I'm just gonna it's not the way, right, it's,
You know, we can't do everything.
Right.
And maybe, you know, I'll talk to Fidel and the town manager and they'll be like, hey, if we gotta do it, we gotta do it, we gotta ask for more money.
So, we're not the only ones concerned with the light poles and path where they are. So conservation and
Yeah.
us and others, and I think they're still internally figuring out how much we're putting to this and what that process is in terms of these
Yeah.
furnishings, lightings, utility poles. So
Okay.
I mean, right, we're not, right, this is it's always odd about these public projects. We're both sort of regulator and funder, and we sort of like have both sides here. And there's a whole lot of other folks, in that too, but
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we seem to be pretty much aligned.
yeah, so, what happens, I don't know what happens if you can't do it, but I guess, right, the point here is that's a component of the project that this board really doesn't feel very comfortable with and wants to try and find a different solution, and,
Yeah, and I
so
understand.
that's really the message.
Yeah.
So if everyone comes back, if says, no, there's no other way about it, then, there's, I don't know,
Yeah, because,
yeah.
I think
Yeah, I get it.
I think a message, a takeaway here is this board might be okay sacrificing the nighttime pathway lighting
Mhm. To address
for
the
moving the
utility
utility poles if the cost is comparable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And could we get some more details about what those cost comparisons are?
In all sort of all aside from that, right, the other thing that you heard from this board is let's look at the intensity of the light
Yes.
along that path, right? Knowing that that doesn't really have probably too much of a financial, issue one way or the other. It may a little bit. Maybe you can fund a bench if you get rid of one pole. But like, I just don't. The sense is that right that you probably don't need a ton of lighting along this, given right, especially if it gets turned off at 10, right, or if it's just really in the morning. It would be used by even fewer people.
Yeah,
right?
and I
So-
guess on that, yeah, it is less of a cost question as it is kind of a style and aesthetic question.
Yeah.
You put good words to it when you said, okay, the 12 to 15 foot poles are park lighting. The bollards are more, I understand that the bollards, you need more lighting. But what we might be looking for is what I'm looking for, I can't speak for others, is more of a feel of campus lighting. That pathway, that spine isn't used intensively for recreation at night. It is used, I think, primarily by people walking their dogs. When I see people pre-dawn in that area,
Yeah.
it's the grass, that pathway is used by people walking their dogs. So something that lights the way without, even though it's a complex and there are too many homes from there, there are homes that face that area. I know the people that live there, they don't all like the lights in the first place. Let's not add more light than we actually need.
Mhm. Okay,
All right.
Motion to close the discussion.
Let's motion to continue it.
Oh, motion to continue.
Move to continue it.
February 6th at 8 p.m.
Okay.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I know that's probably also tricky when you weren't the original presenter and coming back and filling in and dealing with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
no, it's all right. Thank you very much.
All right.
We'll be back in touch.
All right, thank
All
you.
right, thank you
Good,
very
thanks.
much.
All right.
Madam Chairperson, do we need to vote to continue the application for 25 Haven Street?
I think we
We
do. And I saw the notice, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna double check do we need to read in the letter or anything like that?
I would, please.
You would, you said?
Yes, please.
I don't have it in front of me.
Here, you will in a
Hold it
minute.
up.
I can get it in a second then.
Okay, so we have a request by the applicant to continue the hearing for the 40R plan review. Anne, would you like to read that request in?
Yes, please accept this letter on behalf of 25 Haven Street LLC as confirmation of the applicant's request to continue the public hearing to the commission's next available hearing date and time, which I understand is February 6th, 2023. Do we have a time slot for that?
Maybe the
It's gonna be
agenda,
tight.
let's go 8:30, yeah.
Move to put them on the calendar for February 6th at 8:30.
Okay, a second?
Second,
All in favor?
discussion?
Any discussion?
My only concern here is that they're also asking to extend the 120-day period to February 28th, which basically means that we would be making a decision at the February 6th meeting.
So this is something that they've continued along this hearing because we've requested such to avoid potential confusion in the process of when a decision is due and what's allowed. So it's not the first time they've continued this 100-day period. I don't expect that this team would quote unquote like force or expect a vote on February 6th unless you're comfortable in there.
My concern is that if they're going to put it down in writing, which I think is valuable, but they've asked for continuation upon continuation, I would like the extension to be whatever remaining beyond the date. That is all. So if we have 120 days to respond, they come in and then they ask for 5 extensions, it shouldn't be, okay, and 30 days after that last extension, it should be, 80 days after that last extension or whatever. That is my only concern here, is that don't want to lose out on the time because they've been extending it.
Okay, yeah, we've asked them to extend that, so if you do make a decision, that we have the time to craft and post the decision and do all of our town needs rather than doing it in a midnight fashion.
Well, I'll say that I think that, so this is the second or third request past the 120-day period that we've gotten from them, and all along, I've been under the impression that, they would expect us to make a decision at the hearing, at the next meeting, and that's why they're extending the request for a couple weeks beyond that point. I think it's a point really well taken with this applicant. They seem like they've been cooperative. We've had 2 meetings with them. We've had 2 presentations by them. And it does put the commission in a tricky spot where we've had something go for such a long time. And really, by the time frame that's allowed by us, we will be expected to make a decision at the February 6th meeting. And I think that's the reality of it. That is what this is saying. I think that is what this is, unless we're something in the meeting where we say, would you like to have an extension? There's still things that, if they came back to us and they changed their design dramatically, and we were like, all of a sudden, oh, no, we don't really like this.
I can see where you're coming from, for sure,
Yeah.
so.
Now, what if they withdraw these plans? Remember, you and I had a discussion earlier this evening about the property changing hands.
So, 2 separate things.
Right, that's why I'm asking.
If they withdrew, that opens the door for much different conversations. Change of property, ownership can continue under their current application. So I now hear what you're saying. I think what we're looking for is similar treatment to, as this is the opening of the public hearing, and we want 120 days from our continued dates, which really is 2 or 3 meetings, and almost like the opening of a hearing where that 120-day period starts. So that request can be made.
Yeah, and I'll say, I don't know that we need a full 120 days from whatever this hearing is, but we opened the hearing on a certain date. I don't remember when it was. We didn't hear for months and months and months. We had a meeting, we had another meeting, we reviewed. Normally in a 120-day period, if we were working regularly, we probably would have 6 meetings. No, 4 meetings. We probably would have 4 meetings. Sorry, it's late. So I don't know that we need to restart the 120 days, but if they're going to request again, I might ask the 120-day extension be extended to the following meeting so that we're kind of out of this constant like, okay, I guess we're gonna be deciding something whenever they come back.
Yeah.
I don't think this applicant planned that.
I
I
don't
think
think
we
so either.
requested it because of historical issues.
Yes.
And so they said, okay, no problem, we'll give you to the end of the month. It's like, yeah, but give us a real timeline.
But in the
not just-
meantime, it's like, why are we not having the final discussion? Yeah. I'm not feeling suspicious. I think the
Yep.
intention is
Nope.
fine and good.
Your
I feel like
intents
we've
are
also
right.
just learned our lesson, and I'm also feeling like this, I don't know how much of a precedent, I don't know how unusual this is, but to be extending and extending, and
Right.
the applicant gets the benefit of knowing what's going on, we do not. So, yeah.
No, your intent is right and
Yeah.
justified, so I can make that request.
Okay.
Thanks, Andrew.
Mhm.
We did vote to extend it, right?
Yes,
No, we didn't. We
did.
discussed.
We discussed,
We discussed.
We discussed. Alrighty, are we ready to vote then?
yes.
Alrighty, all those in favor? Nobody opposed, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Oh my gosh, okay. Now we have our next topic is the housing production plan review.
So Nicole Lambert from Answer Advisory is here. She has been our consultant through the process. So she has a quick presentation and then discussion as follows with it, and let me pull that up. Nicole, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. I can share the presentation on screen whenever you are ready.
Thank you. You Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. So tonight we're going to talk about kind of where we are in the process of finalizing the update to the 2018 housing production plan that Reading had submitted to the DHCD. So far, Andrew, if you want to go to the next slide. We're just going to quickly kind of go over what the housing production plan is, where we are in the process of creating this plan, the survey results that we received and the feedback, the subsidized housing inventory additions since 2018, and then just some closing remarks and the next steps that Andrew and I are working on at this point. So the housing production plan is actually a community's proactive strategy for planning and developing affordable housing. It accomplishes a variety of things, one of them being the strategy to enable the town to meet its affordable housing goals. It reduces housing units in accordance with the housing production plan, as well as increasing the subsidized housing inventory on the state's list. Each community in the state of Massachusetts is required to meet a goal of 10% of all housing units to be dedicated as affordable to households earning at or below 80% of area median income. It allows the community to participate in planning for the future as to where housing is developed. It does need to be updated every 5 years, and it is reviewed and approved by DHCD, which is the Department of Housing and Community Development, in case anyone does not know that. It is a strategy to determine the type and pace of housing growth. So we did a lot of research here. It does identify the housing needs of the community and also sites for development for additional housing development. And it can also serve as the housing element of the overall town's master plan or comprehensive plan involving housing. Excuse me. So there are a lot of advantages to creating a housing production plan. It provides an opportunity to understand the housing conditions at this current time and also determine projected housing needs for the current population and any changes or growth in the population that is expected. And just some things that we kind of looked at, you know, are there enough starter homes for, you know, new households? Is there adequate workforce housing? Are there options in the community for, you know, empty nesters or people who are looking to downsize? What are the needs of the elderly residents in town? Are there options or housing opportunities for people with physical and or mental disabilities? And are there options for rental and homeownership? So to get into some of the information that we were able to compile here, these are the units that have been developed since 2018. 2015, which was the last plan that was approved by DHCD. Currently, you'll see there are a number of units that have been developed over the last 5 years. So you'll see here Reading Village, Schoolhouse Commons, Postmark Square, Ace Flats, Rise 475, and then we also have some developments that are currently under construction or have been permitted and are awaiting, construction start. So we have Chute Street, Easton Lakeview, 2 portions of that development. Part of those units will be rental units, and the other portion will be ownership units. And then Chute Street looks like those are all rental units. And then there's phase 2 of Johnson Woods that is also under construction with 6 additional home ownership units. So far, we have completed the comprehensive housing needs assessment, which was compiling all different data that was received through research, the Census Bureau, other community information that is available out there for this type of work. So we looked at the demographic data, housing stock data, and population projections, development constraints and limitations within the town, and capacity for growth and the plan to mitigate development constraints. We went through our affordable housing goals and strategies. So kind of coming up with the information as far as how many units the town would need to produce per year, assessment of the housing types that are needed within the town. And then looking at implementation strategies, we looked at some different sites that are possible for future development, and identification of any zoning and or policy changes that might be needed to get those things moving in the right direction. We did host 2 public forums. One was in-person hybrid session at the public library on October 24th. And there was another held by Zoom on November 29th, 2022. Tonight we are attending this meeting, and tomorrow night we will be in front of the select board. All of the forums have been recorded and are available on the town's website. And just to kind of get into some of the survey data and feedback that we received, we were able to get 793 responses within the town, and the survey was closed on November 18th at 5 p.m. So this chart here shows us that the survey was widely distributed throughout the town, and we kind of have, a good distribution as well as a good response rate. So everyone's kind of hovering in here on average at around 10% as far as the number of people in each precinct who answered the survey. And then just some quick demographic data that we were able to compile from the survey responses, just to kind of give you an overview of households that were responding to this survey. 92.7% identified as Caucasian, 52.4% identified as female, 54.4% of the households who responded to the survey make over $150,000 a year. 95.8% are non-veterans, 89% are homeowners. 80% of homeowners live in the single-family homes. 59% of those homeowners currently have a mortgage. 65% of the residents do plan to stay in their current home as they age. And then the most common household size was 2 persons at 35.27%. and 4-person households at 23.26%. Just a quick overview, total population of the town is 25,510. Total households, 9,952. Housing statistics, homeowners, the town is comprised of 84.6% homeowners and 15.4% renters. The median household income, and this is the HUD median household income, is $133,300. 2-bedroom fair market rent per HUD rule is $2,635 a month, and the annual income needed to afford that 2-bedroom apartment is $105,000, $400 per year. And currently, and this was as of August 31st when this data was compiled, the median single-family home price was $825,000. And the monthly payment, estimated monthly payment for that home was approximately $4,242. And the annual income needed to afford that median sales price was $150,000. Again, based on the assumptions in the lower right-hand corner of my screen. I'm not sure what corner it's on yours. As far as interest rate, down payment, taxes, insurance, and other information is included there for your information.
Nicole, I had a question about this slide.
Sure.
Number one, the taxes are off. I can guarantee you that much. I just got my bill. Number two, I don't understand how an annual income of $150,000 is required for a $4,242 mortgage, but only $105,000 is needed for $2,635. It looks like you'd almost need $200,000 for a mortgage that's almost twice as much.
Now that's assuming, okay, well, if the taxes are off, then that's going to be a little bit different, but that is the estimated monthly payment for that property. And let me just see 1 second as I do some quick math here. No, that's correct. The rent, because they're taking 30% of the income for rent.
Okay. So the monthly payment therefore includes all of the taxes, the debt, and the insurance?
Hold on. Yes.
Okay.
And then this is just to kind of give you an idea, the table here of the HUD fair market rent for 2023. These are the numbers here for efficiency 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom. Currently, as of 8/31, median rent in the town of Reading for a 1-bedroom apartment was $2,667 a month. A 2-bedroom apartment coming in at $3,300 and a 3-bedroom unit coming in at $4,000 a month. There were no 4-bedroom units listed for rent. And then this is a breakdown of what someone's hourly wage would need to be in order to afford those apartments at a fair market rent. So again, to afford a fair market rent efficiency apartment, somebody would need to earn $39 per hour. And as you see, as you go up in bedroom sizes, the amount per hour each person would need to make to afford the fair market rent. Again, this is spending no more than 30% of their income on housing expenses. Significantly goes up from there. So a person looking to rent a 3-bedroom apartment at fair market rent would have to make approximately almost $62 an hour to be considered affordable to them. And then this is a breakdown of the purchase price affordability. So again, looking at income, the affordable purchase price, and the estimated monthly payment, and then the gap between what that household can afford and the median sales price. So as you can see, almost every household in the town falls short of being able to afford the median price house. I'm sorry. And then just some information about development in the town. In general, respondents supported the following methods to develop affordable housing. Rehabilitation of vacant and/or foreclosed property was the top one. Development on town-owned land and development of mixed-use buildings. Those were, the top three there. And then in general, respondents supported the following types of development. Single-family housing obviously was number one. Two-family housing was at the top as well. People were very interested in 55+ communities, assisted living and/or senior housing, and accessory dwelling units and/or in-law apartments. So just to kind of jump into the goals and strategies that we identified throughout this process and through our public forums. So we have looked at this as there are 3 areas of focus as far as goals and strategies, and the first one being regulatory and development goals and strategies, where we're looking at zoning, regulations, development tools, geography, etc. The second area of focus is our goals and strategies around funding and resources and looking at revenue sources, support, incentives, opportunities, etc. And then the third kind of category of goals and strategies that we have here is leadership, partnerships, and education, thinking about collaboration, training, inclusivity, programming, and other options out there. So to get into the regulatory and development strategies that we identified, number one would be talking about adopting or amending zoning that would comply with the MBTA communities legislation. We definitely had a pretty in-depth meeting on that last week. Talking and looking at zoning districts, geographies in which the current regulations can be modified to allow development of subsidized housing inventory in those areas, strengthen and expand inclusionary zoning to promote or develop affordable housing opportunities. Number 4, amending bylaws to define and permit congregate housing, identifying existing sites within the town for potential to convert to congregate housing. Number 5 was to allow for redevelopment or conversion of pre-existing non-conforming residential uses by right to make permitting a little bit easier for people. Number 6 is to look at zoning amendments to allow accessory dwelling units by right and or to lessen restrictions on the development of accessory dwelling units. And then the regulatory and development strategies that we came up on were to continue to provide technical support for 40R and 40B permit applications to preserve the existing affordable housing stock and ensure that they remain affordable and will continue to qualify on the subsidized housing inventory list. Number 9 is to maintain the safe harbor designation, which was acquired by the town through the last housing production plan. Continue to track the affordable housing developments to stay at or above the 10% subsidized housing requirement, and then require through regulation items such as open space, connectivity, energy efficiency, and transit-oriented development. And then the affordable housing funding and resources strategies, we're looking at, this was one of the top things that came out of the surveys. People were very interested in first-time home buyer programs. So we would like to look at developing and enhancing those programs with the Reading Housing Authority and other local institutions and lenders. Use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and try to leverage and or increase revenue sources there to seek funding and opportunities to support local aging in place programs and support. and investigate opportunities to provide and or increase Veterans Affairs supportive housing vouchers. And then some additional housing funding and resource strategies to build support for Community Preservation Act. This came out of the public hearings that we had to strengthen the local finances, maintaining the Housing Choice Initiative status for future grants and funding opportunities, possibly implementing commercial linkage fees to fund the affordable housing needs, developing the strategy for additional affordable housing units off-site, considering tax incentives to develop deeply affordable homes, and plan for cases of emergency housing needs or setting up sort of an emergency housing task force. And then to get into the goals and strategies, leadership, partnership, and education. Number one is to foster partnership initiatives with landlords to upgrade their existing units and possibly convert them to affordable apartments. Two is to seek proposals from private developers or property owners to upgrade their developments or units in return for long-term affordability restrictions. Number three, maintain and continue to build a list of interested buyers of affordable units. And then to continue on the leadership, partnership, and education strategies, we'd like to continue to engage the public and educate them on housing options, opportunities, and needs. Continuing to support the work of the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office and to collaborate with other community organizations to promote affordable housing opportunities and developments. And here we are at the end. That was pretty quick. Anybody have any questions?
All right, first question. What is congregate housing?
Congregate housing is housing where 4 or more unrelated persons reside together under the same roof. This would be something like a group home, a home for people with developmental or physical disabilities. It could be a foster home where kids who are in foster care but not necessarily with a foster family could live together in a group home setting. So there are multiple definitions for that.
But basically, it's not multiple units, it is multiple people in one unit.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that, just to clarify. So I have to say, a congregate housing, so there's a house that holds 20 people. How does that count on the housing inventory? Does that count just as one unit?
So, it can be different between assessing and use codes, but generally, yes, it's like a single housing unit.
Right, there's two, right?
And our
There's two
objective
different
is
games
to
that are
increase
being
the number
played
of
here,
units.
right? There's the whole SHI game
Right.
that we have to play. Well, no, there's now 3 games, right, that we play. There's the SHI game, right, where we need to keep above 10% of restricted affordable units,
Right.
right? There's now the MBTA communities game where we have to create zoning that has by right zoning regardless of what we're actually able to achieve. And then there's the real, I'm not going to call that a game, but the real work in creating what's actually affordable units
And places for people to live.
in places for people to live. Yes. Yeah. Which really is tangentially related to some of these other things that we spend way too much time on because we have to, right?
Right, there are different ways of counting it, and it's like.
Which is too bad.
It is,
that we
well, the
get-
congregate
yes.
housing is a
And
good
congregate
example.
housing is a perfect
One
example.
unit may provide a place for 20, I don't
Yeah.
know, 12, 16 people to live.
But it only
It doesn't,
counts,
it doesn't
yes.
get us very far
Yeah.
in the games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So actually, I don't want to interrupt you. Did you
No,
have
that
one?
wasn't my only
Oh.
question.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, where it may or may not have the answer, but where do we stand on the SHI in, like, I should pay attention. Is the census out? Is the census data out yet? And
Yeah.
We were counting, right? There was counting happening? Yes.
So new census data in relation to SHI is expected to be released in May of this year. So it's taken some time,
Yeah.
but we are well aware of where we currently stand, which is over 10%, 10.49, 10.5%, call it, based on our previous and current production. But again, knowing that some of these units could lapse off and get back on after a certain period when they get permitting and so on. So right now we are in safe harbor over 10%, but that's a fluid number that is subject to change based on our denominator of housing stock and then let alone units falling on and off.
and we will know better what our denominator is come this.
Well, it will
come
be
this spring.
9952, I'm pretty sure.
What's that?
9952 will be the number.
And with that, does that, right, you said before we were at 10.5. With the recalculation with 9952, Are we
That's with the 9952.
Oh, it is.
So yep, we
It
have our
is.
local tracking, and so
Okay.
DHCD releases the SHI every 2 years, call it. Their one on their website is 2020. It's very outdated. Even
Yeah.
the one in May 2022 that we got was somewhat outdated and didn't include a lot of the units we requested. So we've gone internally and tracked on our SHI for the new denominator and where we are with them. So
And that's what was shown in the presentation,
yes,
that 9952.
Yes, correct.
And that denominator will not change until the next census.
Correct.
that's good.
Yeah. So we've done Reading's done a fantastic job.
So my other question, I'm gonna ask you to go back to, well, first, right, take a mental snapshot of these 6 strategies, right? But then let's go back to the slide with the survey responses on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is where, right, I sort of find the contrast interesting. In the comment, right, in general respondents, support for the following types of development, right? And I assume that these are listed in order or not.
Very important.
Single family, 2-family, 50 is,
They were listed in order as far as the number of responses. So the ones that received the most priority in the responses are listed at the top. Yes.
so, right, what you don't see on there is
everything.
multifamily units, right? Which we're gonna spend a lot of time over the next year, sort of positioning
Correct.
in town,
Mhm.
right? It's clearly not the town's preference.
Mhm.
And the town, right, according to this, right, their preference is to continue single-family housing development, which I guess, personal comment, right? There is no opportunity or very few opportunities to provide affordable housing through single-family housing in the town of Reading.
Right.
I think that's pretty safe to say,
I think you're right.
right?
Yeah.
And so,
Because our median income is high.
yeah, and we don't have
The
empty
cost of
lots
our
and-
homes are high,
Yeah.
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 And our taxes keep going up.
So I just, right, like the strategies, so now you've looked at that, go back to those strategies,
Well,
none
before
of
we
those.
leave this,
Oh.
there is one, I just wanna point this out, that, okay, there's the second half of the slide, in general, respondents would support the following types of development. Above, there's some income, maybe we can,
Yeah.
it's either consistency or incongruity, even on this slide, where it says respondents support the following methods: mixed-use buildings, is as close as we get to an expression of support for multifamily buildings. I'll
yes,
just point that
yeah.
out, yeah, is
Yeah,
as
no,
close as we
that's-
get,
yes,
yeah.
Yep, yep.
So
But also important on that list was number 5, right, which,
The senior
yeah,
housing.
no, the accessory dwelling
yes,
unit in
yes.
in-law apartments, which shows up on the list, right, ends up in a strategy. But I don't think without,
We haven't approved any.
w-
What, maybe one in the last year.
so that not true. We've approved many accessory apartments. CBA regulates them or they're by
Okay,
right.
so they don't come
Yeah.
from this board.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I guess what I'm trying to get at here is our strategies, which I think are the right strategy. I'm not calling into question those, though this is an uphill battle, because when you ask the town about what types of development they want to see, it isn't the same types of development that we're going to move forward ahead through those strategies. Aside from the last one, which is, well, it's number 6 of the strategy. I don't know if these are in order either. And maybe they shouldn't be, maybe that's a different order. But just sort of like noting that how difficult this job is because when asked, the residents don't really want the types of development
That's needed.
that's needed in order to get to the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
in-
question about the
in-
survey when you're done?
Which sort of gets to the point of why Reading, because you said we have done a good job, but why the state requires this pretty drastic MBTA communities thing on all of these communities to like increase production, because I'm gonna guess that pretty much every community across the Commonwealth is gonna have the same list.
Yeah, in general, our pattern of development doesn't get us the housing that
That we need. Yes.
Can I ask a question about the survey?
Sure.
This discussion is just prompting me. So the responses about the types of development that respondents support, was that multiple choice? And I guess I'm wondering, were options like 3-family housing, which I think is what MBTA community requires, and townhomes, were those given as options or were those not given as options? Because I'm just thinking about other styles of
Yeah.
development that might be like, townhomes are single family, but Very-
Townhomes are not single family.
no, okay, right,
Yeah.
but
Townhomes can be 3-family.
that's right. But they may be, and just thinking about kind of the difference in the types of development that people support and how many people they can fit, how many families they can house. I'm thinking about that and what they were asked, but what were their choices?
These were the choices just because there were a lot. I do believe other questions did kind of break down multifamily into different units rather than just 3+ in general, but in terms
Okay.
of that specific question, there were just many types of options available. Some that probably got cut out, like townhouses, and which was replaced with, say, subdivision with smaller, denser lots. So we tried to capture all uses we could think of without being overwhelming and creating too many fine lines.
Yeah.
But many questions did try to address this same issue of where did you want it, or where would you want denser development, such as downtown, adjacent to the train, in your neighborhood, surprisingly last. So we did look to really capture a lot and just note the major answers in the presentation.
Does senior housing and assisted living, does that count like by, I say bedroom, how does that count in terms of units also? Is that more like congregate housing or is it by like, you have a room that might have Is it
Um,
like by kitchen or by bedroom?
Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's like per unit, almost like a multifamily
Okay.
development that generally they're single bed. Trying to think of Reading Woods as an example that has 55 plus housing. It was just 200 units and no
But that's
limits on
different from,
bedrooms. But
like, that's different from assisted living.
Yes.
Which I
Right.
don't think, right, like I don't, that counts.
So those
So
aren't
Those aren't
units, like household units,
Yes.
like on our denominator, like assisted living facility might have however many rooms, but it's not a housing unit counted for.
Like the one up on Main Street, I forget what,
Yeah.
where
That's,
Eric's,
Artis.
what, Artemis?
Artists.
Yeah,
Mhm.
where the landscaping place used to be, like that's, those aren't in, that's not 50 different
Right,
units.
that's not 70 housing units,
Yes,
right,
right,
whatever the number is.
but it is a different sort of,
But there
It
are
is a
70
place where
people
people
living there.
live.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, but it
right.
is a place where
Yeah.
people live. Whether it's affordable, I don't.
Yeah, no idea.
And I think the only 55 plus in town is on Salem Street over by REI/Duncan's.
Reading Woods down in the corner has some 55.
Is the-
Has some, but it's not restricted, it's not fully restricted.
It's not, so there's 420 units, I think 200 something or 55 plus the other 200.
Is the development next to the church, was that
I don't think that was
age restricted?
That was a friendly 40B.
No, that's right.
The one
It started
before
out
this.
as, it
Yes.
started, yes, sorry.
So can we go back to the strategies?
Yup. And so just also to add, we did try to craft strategies around single family, like the first time home buyers or smaller,
Yeah.
denser single family lot developments that might reduce scale of the mansions, I guess, that are being built.
Oh, I'm sorry, my other question as, I think maybe the next,
Oh, we have lots of strategies, right? Okay.
yeah, so like, these are all good, like who, maybe it's not this one, but like there's a lot of stuff of coordination and like who's doing all that? Who's
That was my question.
Yeah,
My question.
like who's taking on all these actions?
Can I add on to your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
My question was
Yeah,
that.
this was the slide that I was like, oh man, that's a lot to do.
My question was that, and now what as a town do we do with that? Do we prioritize and say this is going to get us, this strategy is a really good strategy because it's going to get us a lot of units for the game, it's gonna actually get us real affordability. How do we, what has Reading done with this? What would you advise we, CPDC and others in fact do with this in terms of the strategies that we pursue?
It's a good question. So you do have to prioritize, and opportunities come up at different times that you have to be prepared for. So this is a group effort more than just planning and
Good night, Carlo.
Good night.
With that.
So I think,
Not me.
right, like we have our regional group, Metro North Regional Servicing Office, which is us and a number of abutting communities that meet monthly or bi-monthly to discuss housing strategies and needs. So that's one avenue, but I think taking that and also applying it locally to continue to meet with like the RHA, Dr. Sadeshna, our diversity and inclusion director, to put together or keep our working group, even though we've established through HPP in constant communication, to start supporting these programs like the first time home buyer. Like what does that take to expand and get the resources? And that might be with RHA and reaching out to Reading Co-op and figuring out who exactly needs to be at the table there. So it's not one person in general that I see it. Planning is heavily involved for sure.
Yeah.
But there are many opportunities to look at.
Sounds like building more tiny
As is-
houses is the best idea.
As
Except
with
they
many
don't
plans.
qualify. That's my
They
problem
don't?
with the MBTA. The MBTA requires you to have 3 units on a lot.
Right? It's,
So you can't just divide up a lot and have 3 tiny houses. You have to
Those are
have,
starter homes.
they would be, but that's not what the MBTA communities require.
it's a game.
It is a game, and behind the game is another game. And ultimately, what we want is to have places where people can live.
Right,
So ultimately, you know, it's threading all of this
So I guess that's
to
why, like when we
ideally
last
then
talked
have
about
community and places
MBTA
where people can
TA
live.
communities, there's the path to compliance, and
Yeah.
then there's the path to get the real need and real
Right.
life
And so the
change.
tiny house development may be a good idea, even though it may not help us on the
Well,
SHI, but it still could be the right
Better
thing
have
if
a
it was the right
three-family
thing to
house
have. Yeah.
that offers, well, condominiums.
I'm really
Or
stuck
rentals.
on that survey slide that
What?
showed what people
That's
want,
homeownership.
but not near them. And I keep thinking about there must be an opportunity to share that somehow, that what people want in terms of places for their parents and their kids and themselves to live doesn't jive with what people say they actually want near them. And somehow I'm not making a whole lot of sense, but somehow we do have to weave through there, and ultimately, you know, not all of these things, but some of these things do, like MBTA communities, requires the support, I think, because if zoning is going to change, requires the support of the community. And I think this is just a conversation we need to keep alive about what people want and the reality of what it's going to take for the town to get to what people want.
Agreed.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions?
What next?
So what next? Yeah.
So,
Well, in terms of this, not tonight, but.
Right.
Right, not
Right.
tonight, but in terms of this.
So you could vote tonight to approve the plan. We gave you a draft plan. It's not where we want it to be yet. So the plan is due February 13th. That's the due date. We gotta give it to DHCD by then. We're bringing it to the select board tomorrow, similar to this presentation, same presentation, Q&A, public comment. I fully expect that they'll take another meeting to their January 24th meeting to digest it, get us some comments that we can look to implement, really finalize the plan by that January 24th meeting where they can look to vote. And so you can also wait. Your next meeting is February 6th if you really want to see the final plan, which I kind of imagine you do. If you've even had the chance to go through the 90-page document that it currently is unfinished. So,
Andrew, it was not in the catalog as of Sunday.
We got the slideshow.
We get the slideshow.
that might have been my mistake then. So we will definitely continue it to February 6th then, because I want you to look at the plan. So, our next steps are to get yours in the select board's endorsement and then submit it to DHCD by February 13th to comply and reach quote unquote safe harbor of having a housing production plan implemented and approved. So DHCD would likely get us some minor comments and feedback that we'd look to address, but generally it's pretty standard stuff. So
I didn't see anything in the slideshow that I would object to. I personally, yes, would like to see the plan if we're going to approve it.
Mhm.
If
Yeah,
the select board is going to offer changes
Mhm.
to it as well, if there's a way we could even be sent that sooner than later, that would be great.
yeah, so our
And
last
even for the plan itself, if you wanna send that to us even just right after this
Yeah,
meeting.
I'll
that's all
send
we-
it
yeah.
right now. So our last things on the plan to put in itself is some of these strategies, and the plan goes into deeper language on how these strategies can be met and broken down, and what we really mean by them. So putting in some of those and then just the updated SHI, which we showed you the 5 or 6 developments, just including those. So there's some other areas to confirm, just like with RHA, that yep, your units haven't been falling off, or engineering's okay with the language we used on sewer and water in town and so on. So everything's pretty minor, and we'll get it done. We're confident that it will be done.
Good job.
Alright.
So we should move to continue?
Not needed for this. I'll just throw it again under other business
Okay.
on our next agenda. And,
And you said this is going to come before select board
tomorrow
Wednesday?
night
Tomorrow night.
and most likely January 24th.
Andrew, given the deadline, for me personally, I prefer to have it as an agenda item as
Okay.
opposed to other business.
Okay.
To be sure that we get to it.
As opposed to, oh, it's midnight, we still got this one last thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I
No,
agree.
We should be proactive on that,
Okay.
and
Got
that
it.
puts you in the safe harbor.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Nicole, did you have anything else to add?
Not at this time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
You as well.
too. So we are on to meeting minutes?
Well, we have a couple of other things, right? Did you wanna give us an update on the MBTA communities? Is there more to update on? Are we
There
getting
is.
progress
There
there?
is.
I saw a whole bunch of stuff in there, like dated, like
Today.
yeah, like
Yeah.
a few hours before the meeting. So
Welcome to
Oh, I
my
didn't look
my
at
current
you
life
guys
right
before the
now.
meeting.
I was trying to absorb some of that. Oh, there's a lot in there.
There is. So, I mean, we did, so in short, we applied for the technical assistance that I mentioned at your last meeting, that we were awaiting the data, and we finally got the data. So, there's a few takeaways from it as I tried to digest it early on for our action plan and how to use it going forward. So, let me quickly just kind of show there. It's probably even better for me to start here. So we did, in the technical assistance, put in 5 zoning districts for review. We put in the DSGD 40R downtown. We put in the Business A zoning district. We put in the A40 zoning district and the A80 zoning district. So sorry, that's 4. We tried to break up Business A or A40 and they didn't do it that way. But either way, we chose those districts. 1, a number of them are within a half mile of the depot. 2, they currently allow multifamily by right as they stand today, with strong dimensional controls or other that do somewhat prohibit multifamily development. So we gave them that zoning data. They got the parcel info and shape files and all that, and inputted it into their tool, which came back that we are indeed short in a number of areas, both on unit capacity and density per acre, which is really the one that I take away as a major concern in Reading, is the density across the entire zones. So I tried to quickly summarize their key takeaways, but at the end of the day, this table does somewhat show it all. So in A40, based on a number of our restrictions, we have 21 units towards the unit capacity in our multifamily zoning district. That's because a number of parcels are undersized, a number of parcels based on the FAR limits there, and other just do not get it. And really it's the undersized parcels there that kind of prohibit that zone. So that's, problem number 1, that our main multifamily zoning district gets us a 21 unit capacity with a 1.2 unit per acre density across it. So I'm just gonna kind of jump to 40R in column 4 because that's the other area that's likely gonna be of major focus. So we're looking at 464 units, which sounds good. That's close to the 600 we need within the half mile of the train depot. But you're only looking at 10 units per acre there. So you need to somehow up that unit capacity here to get 15 here. So
Sorry, how many units do we need within a half mile?
we need, call it 600, 598, call it 600 out of 1,500.
Oh, within a half mile, we need 600.
Right.
Out of 1,500 total.
Right.
Okay.
So,
We need 1,500 total,
Yeah.
600 within a half mile.
right. So,
Is this in our drive
Yep.
also?
so when you look at the table, they give us, call it 1,250 units, just under. So we're close to our 1,500 units, but our density is not there across any zone outside of A80, which way down in the corner, fully built out. I expect that we're not gonna touch it if it meets unit capacity and density as it stands. We could, and it could help raise those numbers a bit, but in general, what we need to focus on is in that half mile of the train depot because that's where we don't meet our requirements right now. So
does the dwelling units per acre need to be at that threshold in each district that we identify as contributing?
correct. So we were a year or two early on our 40R amendments, which is a bummer in short, one way to put it, because it's going to be hard. We want to not change what was changed then, right? We can't go back down on parking after it's gone up at town meeting. It's going to be hard to say we need to change our lot size requirements after approving it in 2022, that we need to in 2023 change it back down. So
Does this mean that we have to change our zoning?
we are going to have, if we want
comply.
40R to comply, our 40R bylaw, we have to amend something to get to the 15 units per acre across the zone. So what we change, maybe lot size, and try to get there. If more parcels are accounted for, it raises the units. Maybe we look at so just to kind of stick on that, the other problem with this tool that I've noticed is, so we looked at our undersized lots, 68 or 69, whatever the number is, that we upped to 6,000, they say would not comply for size requirements. We did that because they don't meet, a large portion don't meet frontage requirements, which this tool does not input. So that's good, I guess, on Reading's end, that we could potentially use those parcels to count towards unit capacity if we go back down, but in reality, they're not developable unless they're consolidated into bigger lots. So it's just another example of how, right, playing the game and how it's hard to apply one tool in a right size fits all to every community. So I do think we can get there by amending our existing zoning and really focusing in on that map of the half mile from the depot.
When you say get there by amending our existing zoning, are you talking about just for the 40R, or are you saying
A40 as well? We will likely have to look at lot size requirements there, and other restrictions like FAR, and I don't think we would need to change building height of 4 stories, but that's up to debate. So
A40 is mostly over on,
So it's actually almost directly to the northeast of our downtown zone, and I don't know why I can't find the map here. Here we go.
it's basically between Main Street and John Street.
Yes. Sort of ish, yeah. So this zone here would likely be the most impacted by any changes. These two are pretty built out, comply, I guess, in terms of lot size, and others I do need to look into them more and make sure each one meets 15 units per acre, which is the other challenge, that if they're not all consolidated into one conglomerate zone, each one needs to individually meet 15 units per acre, and
Oh, so each one of those,
yeah.
yeah.
So the focus is really, in my eyes, Business B, Downtown Smart Growth District, this portion of Business A, which any changes will add to the southern portion as well, and then A40, which would impact here. So, for example, like A40 lot size requirements right now are 40,000 square feet, I believe. There's about a handful of parcels that meet that in this district. So you bring it down, you get many more parcels into compliance and that many more units. I am not suggesting that we look at expanding any zones, because I think that just gets us in an end. You expand the zone, now your density is changing, so it's just a runaround circle of, so working within our existing zones is
Because the density needs to be within an area, not,
within the zone. So if you expand the zone, now you're upping the units needed to hit if you expand 2 acres, now you need to make sure your unit capacity is 30 more than what it was.
yeah, so if you
because
expand the zone, you need to,
in similar,
you're decreasing the density.
right, right.
I'm gonna go back to Tony's idea. Right, because I read some of the stuff that you, summaries that you
Right.
had put together before, and right, it sounds like, right, this is all sort of, right, you just got this.
Yeah.
Right, so a lot of this I know that you still sort of like need to take a deep dive in and sort of understand. But I guess the one of the notes that you made, right, is looking at Business A, right? We might be able to get some production out of there, but then we also fall into what we're really trying not to do, which is convert the limited commercial property that we have into by right residential property.
Right.
And from a town perspective, from a town financial perspective, like that creates all. That doesn't make sense,
Right.
yes.
Right.
So I'm just, all right, looking at that big blue circle and understanding that, you know, that there can be, I'm gonna say tastefully done 3-unit developments. You know, is there some overlay zone that we could create that would have additional production, right? But limits enough so that we wouldn't get like shoehorning, you know, too much, you know, trying to shoehorn in some 3-family unit onto a tiny lot that it wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a big area.
Yeah.
Um,
And personally, I would love to explore the ability to allow, call it 3 to 6 units, maybe almost thinking create like our tiered schedule, like if you're a lot size of 5 to 8,000, 3 units, 9 to 12,000, 4 to 5 units, or so on. Just, that's an undertaking if we want to take it. So we have to comply by end of 2024. So we do have some time baked in, and I will be reapplying for technical assistance because we haven't heard back from the original TA round and they're expected to open up more. So I will be applying for that to help us get a consultant that can do more GIS than we have here, and more conceptual and zoning language. So we're hopeful for that, but
And by
guess it's where-
complying means we need to have the plan in place and zoning in place to be able to do it, right?
Doesn't mean they need to be built, we just have to allow for it.
right? So if you look at their feedback, whenever you have the chance, they have recommendations on A40 and 40R that could add unit capacity, and they would get us pretty close to the 1,500 between those two zones. So the question is the gap between the existing unit capacity and the needed unit capacity. How do we get there? And I don't know that lot size and FAR controls alone will get us there. So they might, but that's gonna take some playing around with the tool.
And that's this technical memorandum.
And then there's comments. So I tried to quickly summarize them. And
The red comments are your thoughts?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I don't see that table in the folder, if you wouldn't
Yeah,
mind
I didn't
slipping
see
that
it.
in. I would
So it's
think
in
so.
their memo. It's at the end of the PDF memo. Unless I somehow completely
We
botched
have a
this
draft
packet.
plan draft action plan form. The tech memo is in a Word document. And the table's not at the end.
I have the
And
wrong
there's
PDF
this
put in there. I
slideshow.
copied the wrong. I apologize on this packet, not up to standards. So
That's all right, you
It's
got a lot
okay,
going
there's a
on.
lot, there's a ton of information there, I don't think I would have seen it in there if you had put it in earlier.
So I will get you this as well tonight and tomorrow, with the
Tomorrow's
HPP. Yeah, so, basically though, and if I pull back up this table, if we can, based on their recommended changes, we can add about 400 units more in business B and a few hundred more in A40, and if we did that, you'd be close to complying between A80, A40, and 40R. So
But do we have the buildable lots for that in 40B? I think we're maxed.
40R. Future can only tell. I don't know. We're zoning for the capacity, whether they're built or buildable. Like I said, they don't meet frontage, but they meet lot size.
Andrew, can you share the document I sent a couple of months back with the
Yep.
board, put it in the next packet, so it's available?
Sure. Yep.
Basically, I went through and I took the GIS data and came up with a couple of assumptions. So I found a 3-unit development that looks like a single family. It is, I want to say, two bedrooms and one bedroom that will fit on a 5,000 square foot lot at 30% lot coverage, 25-foot total setbacks on the sides, 5-foot setback on the front, 15-foot setback in the back. What I came up with was I said I was going to do, it was my wish list. So the parking requirements are 0.75 per unit plus 0.5 per bedroom. So a 1-bedroom will give you the 1.25, but a 2-bedroom pops it up to 1.75. So that it increases the parking. And that, I think, was the key to my strategy, was the parking was going to be your real limitation. Because you just have X amount of space to put a building and the parking, so that you're not going to get 5 units on 5,000 square feet, because you need 10 parking spaces and you're just not going to be able to pull it off. So I increased the coverage a little, decreased the setback some, And you could do that on a 5,000 square foot lot, which was the minimum lot size I came up with. I analyzed all of the S15s in the area, and you can meet your requirements. Now, the beauty of this is that, like the person last meeting, who had a 4-unit on just over 8,000 square foot, they ended up at 17 units per acre. They had sufficient parking, 8 parking spaces. Granted, they were tandem, but that's for the owners to fill out. Those were, I want to say, 3 bedrooms each for the 4 units. So allow the developers, here's what you get. And the limitation was, it was going to be 15 units per acre, and you could go up, if you hit a partial, you get to go up to 1. So there's no, I'm going to put 9 units on this one lot because I can get 9 units somehow. It's, here's your maximum, and that's what you get. So a 10,000 square foot lot gives you like 5 units, which is 2 5,000 square foot lots.
Could you do that with more than a 5-foot setback? Or is the 5 foot?
Well, as
setback
you-
in the back?
5 foot in front.
The 5-foot front setback, bring houses closer, making it more walkable. Figured if you're going to start pulling some setbacks, that's the one you're really going to pull out more. Being, what's the value of being 20 feet from the roadway?
Green. But yeah, anyhow, it's interesting. I'll look at that. I'll be interested to look at that, yeah.
The other thing I also put in there was that for every new unit created, so if you have a single family home and you put up a 3-family, that means you've created 2 new units. You add to the housing fund the 1/10 the difference between an affordable unit and the medium, which in this case is 395,000, as we saw in the housing production plan. So it'd be a 39,500 for every additional unit you created. This way you could get some of your affordability going, so that money could be used to help perhaps purchase a unit that could be deed restrictable in the future.
Yep.
The beauty here is also that this is where the only question I have, whether the board community would prefer to allow for fewer units. So I have a 5,000 square foot lot. The reason I came up with that was it was the best I could fit, and to meet MBTA requirements, you have to have 3 units minimum.
Right.
So if you have a 4,000 square foot lot and you put 2 units on there, even though you are above your 15 unit per acre, doesn't count.
Doesn't count, right?
Which is
So-
the problem with our 40R, that a number of lots are so small, they can't
Right.
get 3 units, even at 20 DUA, they're
Yeah.
not 3
Yeah.
units, so.
But if you've got, so I did the 5,000s, and that's what I got to fit. We saw 6,000 get 3 units on 14 Chapin, and those are huge units. So I think it can be done. The question for the board and for the community is, do you want to allow less than the 15? Or do you want to require the 15? So instead of putting my 3 units on my 5,000 square feet, can I only put 2 units?
I think I'm gonna put this out there, that I think also if we're going to be looking at whole districts like that, a big question is to also look at it holistically. So even though it may not all get built out that way, I think we need to prepare for the fact that it might. And if you're building out that way, then this area is also really where we have the least green space. I mean, really, I'm focused on this. It's like, so what will living look like in that area? So something to consider also.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a lot there, yeah.
We become a city.
Well, I was going through the MBTA notes, and there are some communities that are ruralish, so they don't qualify, like Boxford, because either they're not large enough, or they don't have 500 people per square mile or something to that effect. And I'm going, well, isn't that where you'd want to increase your density?
That's exactly where you have the
Yeah,
ability
need
to
to do
increase density,
density,
yeah, yeah.
So, but they're
The capacity, yeah.
surprisingly exempt. Imagine how Boxford manages to get exempt from these
On a
requirements.
train line, bus line,
No train line, no, but
but they're a community that we're trying to back up against. or
Right.
not us personally, but.
Yeah, but there would be the abutting community.
Yeah.
So in theory, they should have, but because they're so low density, so rural, we've decided they don't have to increase them. That made no sense.
Give them a train line and they'll have to.
Well, it's because they have no train line, that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Methuen doesn't have a train line either, but it's required to meet the MBTA requirements because it has a higher density.
Oh,
So, but yeah, if you look at downtown, you've got a lot of smaller buildings that used to be two families. Virtually, I'll call it a tenth of a mile from downtown, almost everything was a two family at that point. And in my area, down by John Street, Green, Washington, etc., everything that's being rebuilt as a two family.
So, right, I mean, taking a step back from the games, right, the reality is that, I mean, at least on affordability, right, Reading's been doing our share, right, we've been
doing
meeting,
well,
yeah, we've
right,
been
yeah.
doing well. But in terms of housing production, right, like the housing production plan, right, like it's a problem in terms of affordability and
Yeah.
and we do, right, every community does need to do their part and it's not gonna, Eastern Massachusetts, right, after this all gets enacted, really isn't gonna look like it did, 20 years ago. It just
No,
it
it's
just
not
won't.
possible, right?
And that's will be the trade-off for being more affordable.
Yeah.
Right? It's not gonna be the same, but hopefully it'll be more affordable.
It'll look like it did 100 years ago,
Yeah.
when everything was built around the train tracks
And the trolley lines.
and the
yeah.
trolley lines.
So sorry, was your example an overlay, what you were?
It was an overlay.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll include that in the action plan, nothing is binding in it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but, so like, that's right, that's how, what do we determine? Do we look to amend existing zoning, which does limited in terms of fixing things, in my opinion, or do we really push? And if it fails, we won't comply though, if that doesn't pass town meeting, we're not gonna reach compliance by 2024, so.
But
Well, we need to do, right, I guess,
might do a little bit of both.
we need, if we're looking at amending the downtown smart growth district, right, we went through that, if we make modifications there, that may not.
Right.
That may not
Right.
push through, and so I guess the way that I'm thinking about this, just knee-jerk reaction, right, there's still more work to do here, but like, there are some options, I mean, there may be some options here, is, do we continue to focus growth downtown, which we heard, wasn't preferable, but okay, then the alternative is that we've gotta push it out, a little bit further.
Yep.
I don't know what the right answer is, I mean, it's not up to me, right, it's up to the
town.
it's up to the town, but having different
Having different options is good
having
for
different
workshops.
options, having different options is good, and it's crazy to me that we're sort of being, I'm gonna say forced to undertake what is gonna be a fairly transformative sets of decisions
Yes.
in a very tight deadline.
Yeah.
In some communities, it's really not that transformative, right? Because they have this piece of property that hasn't
Or
been.
their train station is in an area that has lots of room for development.
Right, those all like
Like,
industrial,
It was in an
yeah.
industrial area, and that's just not how Reading is, right?
Like I could think of, like Mishawaka,
Newburyport.
right? Mishawaka.
Yeah.
I could rezone that. I could come up with a great scheme,
Exactly,
right?
you're right.
Like, not if no one would blink an eye.
Right, and
Anderson, I mean, I guess a lot of that's been built up around there.
Well, that has different issues,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
but
that's true, yeah.
that is perfect example,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so some communities, this really is not gonna be all that transformative.
No.
Reading, it will be.
Well, also, I noted Boston is exempt from this.
No.
Yes.
I mean, they're just a different type of
It's a
zoning
different, yeah,
and-
they wouldn't,
It's
you
so
wouldn't,
dense there anyhow.
try to fit the,
You'd have to build skyscrapers to increase it, I mean.
Oh, no,
more
I think the
skyscrapers.
reality is Boston probably around the T station hits your 15 units per density without a problem.
yeah.
Now it does, yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, all that is short in saying we'll submit the action plan a number of communities have already for either existing amending zoning or creating an overlay, and figuring it out. So the next steps, like I gotta review the data and in more detail and gather some local data from your spreadsheet and our GIS as well, to really start playing with the tool and seeing what is what in terms of upping unit capacity in existing zones. I don't know how you test an overlay in the model. I'll have to figure that out. I guess
That's
you
where
would,
your technical assistants
Right.
can come in handy.
yeah, so,
Well, the way you do it is you just assume a new zoning
right, exactly, I just
and
give
apply
it
it to those
right, I
lots.
give it an acreage into those
Right.
plots, right, like a shape file over, which I can do, so. It should be pretty simple, and then you just
So
whip up whatever.
let's do a long range view of this. Let's say we adjust zoning so that we make bigger properties on smaller lots, okay? Put up bigger units,
Well,
or
Higher
anybody who's
density.
got a higher density, right?
because the reality is, the reason why houses go for $865,000 in Reading is because they're 3,000 square feet. You drop those down to get a 1,200 square foot property on a lot, or 1,200 square foot.
Right.
You're not getting 865 for your 1,200, you're getting something a little bit more reasonable.
Right.
Right, it gets you your
Okay,
starter,
so-
starter home.
Right.
That being said, we have a point where we've adopted the zoning.
Mhm.
How does that get communicated to all the developers, and do the developers, is there ever going to be a situation where the domain issue comes into play?
What is the domain issue?
The town seizes your property so it can build something. Eminent
eminent
domain.
I don't think Reading even has the right, you
You've
would,
got the right to do it, right?
well,
They can do it for any
towns
reason.
have the right.
Right.
We would have to have an active plan
Mhm.
to, a redevelopment plan, right? And, I don't know, aside from the, New Crossing Road area,
Mhm.
right? Or when we did the dump,
Mhm.
right? I don't think Reading has ever been in that game.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is, you know, you rezone, the MBTA communities plan doesn't, there's no requirement that the town actually meets. So at that point, it's market forces at play. So somebody wants to sell their home, are they gonna sell it to another, will they get that best price from somebody who's going to buy it as an individual landowner, as an individual homeowner, or somebody who's going to redevelop it into a triplex?
The reason I ask that is that's been asked of me by a number of my neighbors. Can they come and seize my house in order to put up a 3-family?
Unfortunately,
So
and
it's
I hate to
important to
be
address.
honest to people and everybody listening at home.
Yep.
The answer is yes, they can. However, any eminent domain has to go through town meeting. And if you think town meeting is ever going to vote to take somebody's home, you haven't been attending Reading town meetings.
Well, and so that's even, I wanna be really clear, it's like even Tony, when you say yes, they can, right now, no, they can't because nobody's approved it.
Okay.
Right, so,
Yeah,
Right.
and they have, right, there has to be a
Right.
whole,
There
right,
has-
they
there has
can't
to be a
just come
reason.
around
There has
the
to be
next
a
day and
reason.
say, hey, town meeting, I wanna approve that. There has to be a whole sort of like
Justification.
economic development purpose and function in order to go and do
Right.
that. You
So-
can't just say, oh yeah, I want that property.
but so the MBTA communities, I don't know, program requirement, that alone doesn't trigger eminent domain.
Okay.
No, and I mean, be under no developers are well aware of this and are ready for it, like by no short stick. But
Yep.
they can't force anything on a lot they don't own or
And
anything.
it's similar to the 40R. If you noticed, as soon as we expanded the 40R district and we cleaned everything up, they came out of the woodwork.
Mhm.
Boom, boom, boom.
Which is honestly, right, is the hope of the administration.
Right.
Yeah, it's a hope of the administration
Yeah.
is that, oh, the rules of the game have changed and developers come in and start knocking on doors and saying, yeah, hey, I'll buy your property because I want to build this
Oh, I'm
three-family. And
already
there will
getting
be,
those letters weekly.
right, and there will be, you know, a whole, I could say, a cottage industry that comes up, you know, sort of all across eastern Massachusetts, taking, you know, sort of taking hold of this opportunity.
The advantage for if you're an elderly resident who hasn't been able to upkeep on your home, you don't have to go through the expense, more than likely, of rehabbing your house and getting it into condition.
They're
So
gonna
They're gonna knock it
they're
down.
gonna tear it down, but they're gonna give you a
Market value.
market value, which will be more than your house is worth by itself, because now I can put up 3 units on it instead of 1. And you're not gonna end up, and that's the other thing, that's one of the reasons why I don't
We're
wanna
playing the
expand.
game, and this is a game changer for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
I don't,
yeah,
A40 or the 40R, I don't wanna expand, because expanding it simply means that you're gonna get larger developments. You're gonna get your 55 units, your
Yeah.
75, even your 30. But being next door to a 2-family is a whole lot different than being next door to a 40-family.
Oh, yeah.
And I think our job, if we go that direction, is to zone it and possibly have design guidelines, whatnot, so that 3 families can coexist with single families for a long, long time during the transition, so that people don't feel squeezed out and rebel against any change like that.
So
Well, they do exist
Well,
throughout Reading right now.
They exist
Yes,
right now, they
yes,
exist right now,
all over the
yeah,
place, and
right.
they're
Onesie
You-
twosies
yeah,
here,
yes,
and that's what you're gonna see for
Exactly.
development.
And they're barely
you
noticeable, right.
yes.
so
And how you do notice it, honestly, right, it's the number of cars parked out front.
Yes,
That's how you notice.
yes, exactly.
So, and I brought it up with this legislation plays perfectly to form-based code, which is not zoning. It's different. It's a newish type of regulation. Ayer has adopted it. A number of communities in Mass have, but it really focuses on the design of the box and what you want it to look like, and whatever somebody puts in there, 2 units, 3, 4, 8, if they can fit it, that's what they do. And so I'm still learning a lot about it. I'm not saying that that's where we go here because it's still new and needs to be explored further, but this does play perfectly almost to form-based code if you want to control more what it looks like than the use of multifamily. If you 6, 8 units, you know, if there's a difference here, if you care more about design and what your community looks like, form-based code is a pretty good option for that in terms of this, but I don't know how it would if they would consider it compliant or not if a form-based. So I'm not saying that that's what we do, but as a planner, I nerd out a little bit on it. So, yeah, so that's where we're at. I mean, I do want to give an update to the select board to get their input as well. I know I mentioned the possibility of a joint meeting. I don't know if that will go forward or not. I think an update to themselves first, but in the meantime, we're working on it.
Okay, that's fair.
It's a lot there.
There's a lot there, and out of
So-
that, you know, it's late, and pardon me for asking, but so. because you
Motion to
may have said,
adjourn?
no, on the MBTA communities, like what happens next month? You said you're gonna apply for additional technical assistance, we'll go, it's all in your technical memo, you wrote.
So I haven't seen the
Yeah.
new TA open yet. I just got word today that they might look to reopen when and how much and who, I have no idea. But as soon as it does, I will apply. So the next step is submit that action plan, non-binding action plan with a general checklist of boxes and schedule that really I'm just gonna build out to January 2024
Okay,
to give us as much time as we need.
and
So
that goes in when?
January 31st.
Okay.
Most likely end of this week.
right.
So that's our next steps, and then we have a year to figure it out. So
Okay. Thanks.
just about 2 years. December 2024.
Alright.
Motion to adjourn without looking at the, can we get our minutes to you by tomorrow sometime?
Get edits to the minutes, I mean?
Yeah, our edits or comments?
Yeah, could we send edits to you in the meantime, and then, okay,
By all means,
and then we
Okay.
could just approve them quickly next time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll have your executive session minutes next time too. I'll look to button those up early too, and get them to you.
Okay,
Andrew, if we have no changes, should we also notify you of that so that you know
Don't wait for
everybody's
Yeah.
made a comment or looked at them?
No, if you have no changes, I don't need an email. I can
Okay.
bring it to the meeting and you can say then, no comments. Yeah. I'm
Alright.
good.
that's terrific.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I could give you a million updates, but I think we're good.
Any important updates, any significant ones, quickly?
Let's see. So we're probably going to expand the Millet project a bit. We got a federal earmark so we got a $2.1 million MVP grant. We got the town meeting approval for $1 million to help fund the match and or other needs there, and now we have a $2 million earmark, so we have a lot of money. So the one thing we're hoping to look at is part of that project was the known need that we need to upgrade the Lowell Street culvert and change it. So we may look to now wrap that into it. So that would be a big change, but a big substantial improvement to the plan design and really take the wetland system a long way. So it's worth looking at now that we have potential funding for it. And there are other uses that might be considered with that funding, and maybe it's just the project as it is if costs have gone up that much. So I can't say that that's the only thing, but that was a big win for us to get that funding to help supplement any additional needs. We're expanding it. We got our ACR grant for the community garden on top of additional potential funding, so that will be expanded. That was a grant we put in November and worked hard on, so that was great news. And we're submitting the MAPC TAP application this week to help supplemental funding the net zero plan that's to kick off in 2023.
What's the tap?
TAP is Technical Assistance Program, so MAPC has a bucket of funding that they use to help small supplemental funding to push things the extra mile to get them across the finish line. So we got a community best practices grant, community compact grant for that for I think 50,000. We'll be asking TAP for about 25 to help really get it where it needs to go in terms of greenhouse gas inventory and so on, working with RMLD and CAC and other partners. So that will be a substantial
cool.
plan. Yeah, I'm very excited for that one. Project wise, we have a few subdivision applications in the making. We have some site plans in the making, and that's about it. So
It's a lot.
I just wanna know when the sewer pipes are going to be fixed on Ash and Green
we all.
Streets. Holy moly, tap, 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 it's 7:22 in the morning.
I am sure there is more, and my to-do list is on my desk. That's about 2.5 pages long. So there is more, but
And you're hiring somebody.
we are
right?
looking to backfill for the senior planner. So hopefully sooner rather than later. We have a few qualified candidates that we're interviewing this week, and may also look to repost just to try to open the pool up a bit as well. So hopeful to get that done. We do need some staffing, so but in the meantime, all is good, and I'm excited. So,
Terrific.
All right,
You
I'll
keep
second the
looking
motion.
Alrighty, all those in favor
Aye.
of adjourning?
Wow.
Thank you.
Well,
guys.
it's not midnight.
No, that
No.
was a super productive evening.
That was a good. Thank you for all. So, you know, we do take your feedback and give it, and where they go.
Well, and I thought that was a good executive meeting too.